this quote is actually up in my classroom. It's really important to me, is that discipline trumps motivation. Now, both are important. Both are absolutely important. But, it's easy to do anything when you're motivated to do it. When you wake up and say, hey, this is what I want to do. But motivation comes and goes.
Hello and welcome back, everyone. My name is Will, the Right Wizard, and you are listening to I Choose Coffee, podcast about communication, mental health, and embracing the absurd. I just want to take a moment to thank all of you who have joined me on this journey so far. We are on episode 5. This is absolutely incredible. We've been able to really dive into some important subjects, incredible topics, but we keep it light and interesting, and you are the passionate, curious, amazing wizards out there that continue to make this all worth it. The guests that I've been able to have the pleasure to have on this podcast have just been incredible. They are people who have chosen life. They're continuing to embrace the absurd and to lean into curiosity. And that's what we do. We have these kinds of conversations, but just you being part of this journey is absolutely incredible. So thank you for being here. Today, I am joined by John Steadman, who has been a longtime close friend of mine and is also just a courageous, interesting human being who has always been curious and always done his best to overcome challenges and embrace the absurdity of life. I've learned a lot from John over the years. John has been a high school teacher for over 10 years at King's Christian Collegiate in Oakville, Ontario. And he's also been coaching basketball and the softball teams at that high school. Today, we were able to just dive deep into what is going on in the high schools in 2025. We talk about the importance of discipline, the real issues that are happening with AI and the rise of AI in the classrooms, the role of mental health in sports, and how sitting with questions is what education is all about, rather than always trying to find an answer. It was an incredible conversation with John. I had such a great time. I hope that you enjoyed this too. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Will. Excited to be.
Absolutely, man. You yourself being a high school teacher here in Canada, in Ontario. My first question for you, I'd like to know, and I'm sure your students would like to know too, what was high school like for you?
Oh boy, it's getting to be a long time ago now, but I think kind of have a simple answer for it. I was sort of that awkward, innocent kid growing up in Oakville. Comedically, I always described to people I was basically like Michael Cera in Superbad. That was kind of my demeanor in high school. Just awkward, innocent kid. I guess notably, I was sort of a two-sport athlete, being a pretty decent basketball player, and then came to be a kind of a high-level swimmer. So those were some sort of north stars or areas of focus. That was a great experience that I really dedicated a lot of my time and effort to in high school. And I had a great experience. I went to a really, really good high school, had a lot of fun, had a few friends at high school, had a few friends outside of my actual school. I didn't really have a lot of huge memorable experiences really in a negative way, and had a lot of positive experiences. So pretty simple kind of high school experience. And then I guess just for your viewers getting to know me, I don't have a single good memory where I was enjoying something by myself. I'm a people person. And I just had a lot of great experiences with great people all the way through.
All right. Well, that sounds like a pretty good standard high school experience then. That's awesome. So there wasn't any real hate towards high school. It because sometimes a lot of people talk about how they hated high school, how it was such a hard time for them. But I guess that wasn't really your experience, right?
No, I always tell people, in being a swimmer, the high school experience is a little bit different. There's certain things, especially in your senior years, that you kind of turn down or maybe sacrifice in a way just through your dedication to sport. But no, yeah, I had a great experience at high school and university, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit in the podcast as well. But yeah, I mean, a huge blessing that it was just a good experience. I didn't love the school part all the time.
Right.
But but even for my students, even for those who don't maybe love their classes, Like what I hope for them is that they always find something that they can look back on that is a good experience. It's really not all about um, the academics. It's really not all about the social. It's not all about the sports. It's really all together. And there's a lot of opportunities for it to be positive. I believe for everybody, as an educator.
Mm, yeah. No, I think having that perspective is good, like that kind of wide view perspective that it's not just the one thing. It's not just education. It's not just the social. There's many elements that are involved in it, right? Would you say that you felt like you came out of high school prepared for life? Like, did you with the Canadian education, did you find that you felt that you're like, "Oh, okay, I know more than I did before." Did you get that sense from high school or
Yeah, I think again we can kind of break that into those different areas. Like I remember being in first year, um, I never felt underprepared academically. Like first year was hard.
Mm,
And that's always first couple years of your undergrad experience. They're sort of trying to, I don't want to say weed people out, but it can be challenging, and you're not really specializing yet into the things that you're really excited about. Um, but but I do remember feeling in my first year classes like, yeah, they taught us enough of this that I should be able to latch on to what they're asking us to do. But the challenge for me, and I think for a lot of students, or at least for some, is there were other areas that maybe I wasn't as prepared for as maybe some other people were. And that was, getting enough sleep and, you know, taking care of, different social pressures and relationships and who you meet there. I could have been more prepared for that. But I think part of the whole experience of moving from high school to university is you're not going to be prepared for all those things. And that's the beauty of the adventure. But from an academic, like student standpoint, I felt like the Ontario system did me well.
mhm.
Unfortunately, I know that's not the story for everybody. Everybody has a different an array of abilities and a baseline where they're coming from. But for me, I felt academically prepared, but I definitely had other bumps in the road. Got really sick in first year, wasn't sleeping enough, just things like that.
Ah, yes. Yeah, the classic sleeping schedules of teenagers, right? Yeah. I didn't sleep either. So, yeah, probably is what made it more difficult. For myself, just a little bit of background for me. Yeah, I didn't hate high school. I actually, uh, I didn't have any problem with it, but I didn't like the educational side of it, like the learning side of it. But I think that was more just a lack of motivation than it was an actual problem with the system. So because when I had the right teachers, it was great. Like I really enjoyed my English classes. I really enjoyed some of the history classes I did. Even I went to a Catholic school, and I'm no longer religious, but I had a great religion teacher, and it was actually interesting, So, like, I hated religion at the time, but it really kind of showed me that, like, the the educator, like, the teacher, can make such a profound impact on the actual education itself. Like, the curriculum is important, of course, like, what they're able to do, but, like, that energy and that passion that comes from the teacher and how they're able to convey and communicate the information is just so important.
And teaching is a relational job. And thank goodness it is because we are created to be relational beings. So if it was just about a transfer of knowledge, I don't think there'd be a classroom. I don't think there'd be a use for it. And I love the word that you used. You didn't feel necessarily as motivated in high school because that's a topic I would love to get into. The idea of motivation versus discipline, and just the setup of the school system and how it kind of influences those two qualities that I think everybody needs to have and draw on at times is an interesting topic of conversation.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, before we get there, I'd like to know just what even brought you to teaching. Would it be like some of this element, like that idea of wanting to motivate people? Like, what brought you to being able to be an educator, essentially?
Yeah, great question, man. I think for me, I guess I kind of have the assumption that this isn't sort of the normal route, but maybe it is. I never thought I was going to be a teacher. It wasn't even something I was looking forward to. I tell people all the time I never really was a future thinker. And in my college life, I was pretty good at staying in the present. I was focused on other things. And then there came a time that it was like nearing the end of my last semester at college, and my parents were kind of on me about like what's next. Pretty typical, standard thing. And I was like, I don't know. I just think it'll work out. Maybe something in sports because I put a lot of my
Yeah.
identity into either being a sports fan or just an athlete. And actually, Teachers College was going to be a 1-year program in Ontario, but it was going to move to a 2-year program, which it is currently right now. And my mom made the suggestion. She said, well, it's a 1-year program now. You could sneak in there. And if you don't use the degree, whatever, but it's 1 year. You love to talk. You have some leadership skills. Maybe it's something you can do. And that ended up being great advice because I enjoyed the program. And I had an opportunity at a school sort of right out of the gate, which also kind of took me by surprise. And you just kind of wake up one day and you're somewhere good through hard work and just kind of never look back. So that's how it worked
Mm,
out for me. But I feel like a lot of teachers, they either had maybe a family member in the field or they grew up wanting to do it, or they
yeah.
realized somewhere along the way that maybe they loved being in school. So they wanted to continue giving back to that type of industry. That was not my story at all. I was similar to you, didn't really love learning on the terms of like a course, didn't love
Mhm.
school, just kind of got through it. But I really enjoy being on this side of things.
Mm. Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. I think that that's another path to end up in this role that you didn't always want to be here, right? It's something that kind of developed all over time. I think that's also important, and I think there's an important element because you're able to relate with some of the students who, yeah, just maybe don't feel that same like desire to be in the school with time. There are some students that really love learning and they are incredible. But there's a lot of them, like myself, that was just not interested. So, like going back to that, like motivating question, because I think I am quite interested in that. Like, how do you motivate students to learn when they are just seemingly not that interested?
Yeah, and especially these days, that's a really,
It's
really good
crazy.
question. So, a quote, whether it's in my coaching, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit, or whether it's in the classroom, this quote is actually up in my classroom. It's really
Mhm.
important to me. Is that discipline trumps motivation?
Discipline.
Now, both are important. Both are absolutely important. Um, but you know, it's easy to do anything when you're motivated to do it. When you wake up, say, "Hey, this is what I want to do," um, but motivation comes and goes. And I think something with education that is a bit of a problem right now um, is that there's this increased emphasis on grades, and that is something that has changed in the decade that I've been doing this. Can't believe it's almost been a decade,
Mm,
um, but something that has definitely changed is grades are important because you got to get into university if that's the goal. Marks have inflated a little bit, um,
mm,
but when you're motivated for a number that is determined by curriculum that is laid out by not the individual, that
yeah.
is what you call like extrinsic motivation. So you're motivated by something because you know what it's going to get you, but it's not coming from within. And there's a lot of research that extrinsic motivation is hard to sustain.
Mhm.
So what you have to do this is the $1 million question that you asked as an educator is how do you take what for a lot of students they're in a stage of development where they're distracted by social pressures. I'm talking about high school, but this could work to the elementary level too. There's social pressures. They're growing. There's hormones. You never know what the story is of a student who's at home. There's all of these things going on, and you want to try to unlock some curiosity and passion for a subject within them so that extrinsic motivation that's going to run out is going to become internal. And
Mm,
that's a really, really big challenge. Um, and what I lean on is sort of what we were talking about before is you try to be relational. And a big
mm,
philosophy in my teaching is I do think I can kind of relate to those kids who, don't necessarily want to be there or just trying to get through it, like you and I sort of described our stories to
mhm.
be. Because I can kind of level with those students, and sometimes the ones who are really into it already, they might jive really, really well with another teacher who's creative, who is always loving to be there, and that's one of the true beauties of of like having a big school or just the school system in general is when you get to the high school level, you have multiple teachers.
Hmm.
And that's a really, really great thing because something that I learned pretty early on is you're not going to be everybody's favorite, unfortunately.
Right.
You have a class of 24 to 30 kids. Just by sheer stats alone, there's going to be 3 or 4 kids who just don't jive with the way you do it. And
Mm.
that's okay because they have 4 or 5 other teachers, and one of them is going to bless them with something that they can connect to. But yeah, turning that extrinsic motivation of, a grade
Hmm.
to something that is from within is really what you have to try to do.
Hmm. Yeah, and there's something really powerful to that. I think it's becoming lost in our culture, this intrinsic value of learning, right? Like that it's always about something we're trying to achieve, whether that's, yeah, like in a goal, like on a test, higher grades, getting into university. And then why do a lot of people go to university? They go to university so they can get a job. And then there's always like that next goalpost, right? And what you lose in that is that value of actually learning something and doing it for the sake of actually doing it. And as like we want to be practical, like being practical is reasonable, right? You don't want to just study something just because, but at the same time, you kind of do because that's where you're going to actually learn more, right? So you mentioned that like the discipline is really important. So I guess what I'm taking what you mean by that is that we can actually train that. Like we can teach people, we can teach kids how to be disciplined. So is there a way that you have been able to do that with high school students in 2025?
Yeah, great transition there, Will, because that is the other side of this, right? So students don't wake up motivated every day, just like you or I don't wake up
Right.
motivated every day. So what do you lean on when your motivation wanes? It's discipline, which sort of to me is defined as like doing things that you don't want to do when you know it's the thing that you need to do. Um, and here's how I think things have really changed in the last period of time with the emergence of social media and just having everything at our fingertips all the time. Is just the baseline amount of discipline required to get through the day
Mm,
is less than it was before in a lot of situations. So, what I mean by that is before everybody had cell phones. I didn't have a cell phone until first year university. Now all the students have cell phones. This is just one example. But if you were sitting on the bus 10, 15 years ago, you just had to watch the condensation on the windows and you had to reflect on what was going on. When you were sitting waiting for an appointment, you might have to interact with people around you. These are things that you may not feel like doing, but you're stuck having to do them. So if we're thinking about high school age students, there was a level of discipline just in the day to day that isn't required of them now because they can sort of have what they want through technology quicker, it's more accessible.
mhm,
So I would say that there's a level of discipline that has been lost that's affected things
mhm,
like attention span. So those are the skills that I think it's really important to develop with the students. You can try to curate your course and what you're doing to motivate them and for them to have fun with it. But the skills that you want to demand come out of the work that you give them is you want to foster discipline
mhm,
because discipline's really going to get you to the next level. And that's why I think athletics is just among other things. I mean, I was an athlete, but we can talk about the being in arts as well. But putting your mind to something at a high
mhm,
level gives you discipline, and that can carry with you into any career.
mhm. Oh, absolutely. I think that's such an interesting point. I didn't even think about that, how the the discipline side of ourselves is lost because we're constantly being bombarded with information and something to take our attention at all moments, right? Even myself, like I think a lot of people talk about like, oh, these Gen Zs and these kids these days, they can't pay attention, whatever. You know what happens when I stand in front of the elevator for longer than 30 seconds? I go on my stupid phone. Right? So I'm trying to learn how to not do that. I'm actively working on that. But I'm I'm in my 30s and I struggle with this. I can't even imagine what it
Yeah,
would be
but
like being 16 years old.
absolutely. By no means do I want this to come off as like an attack on Gen Z. This is a societal change. It just so happens that high school students, they're still trying to get through their education. This is something that we did not have to deal with as student athletes back in our day. Is they're yes, these students these days, they have more information at their disposal, and I do find students to be a lot more informed about what they want to be informed on than we ever were, which is there's positives with it. Um, but I believe there is a problem with discipline that comes from just the accessibility of things that people want, short-term scrolling, things like that. That has affected things. So I try really hard to foster a sense of discipline and focus on discipline more so than motivation. Because usually if discipline can lead to, if it can lead to some good results, then you start to feel a little intrinsic motivation from the confidence of, feeling the dopamine of those results. So all these things are connected, and it's what makes the job really, really fun. Interesting.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, that perspective, this motivation discipline thing that I think that applies in so many parts of our lives. I mean, I'm a perpetual procrastinator, right? And being a creative person myself, like I struggle with this all the time. I'm like, well, I'm not motivated today. So like I can't do it. But like that's not the right way of thinking about it. Like having if I have more discipline, like, well, I'm gonna do this because this is part of my habitual routine that I've built over time towards goals that I'm trying to achieve, then it doesn't matter how motivated I am on the day. Because that's like you said, it's like the wind. It's just gonna keep moving. It's going up and down, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and talking about procrastination or really any disciplinary habit that one wants to change, the thing that's so unsimple about human beings is that everybody requires a somewhat different solution, right? So if one person's having a procrastination problem, there might be a certain trick or a strategy that would work well for them that isn't going to work necessarily well for somebody else. Wouldn't life be so easy if it was like, well, here's how you stop procrastination. You just do this one thing.
Seriously.
It's very similar to like I constantly struggle to play golf, and it's like for me to hit the ball well, I have to think about three totally different things than the person beside me.
Mhm.
And it's all of like, being a high school student, that's sort of the period of time where not only are you supposed to develop, knowledge in all these subject areas, but you're supposed to try to figure out how do you study? What are the situations that you need to avoid? What are the ways that you as an individual avoid procrastination? And all of that stuff is individualized, um,
Mm,
which is another beautiful challenge.
yeah. That brings up actually an interesting idea because you're in a classroom of, let's say, 20 kids. It used to be, God, like 30, 35, but like, how many would you usually have in your classroom these days?
Yeah, so I'm at a private school, so I'm actually pretty fortunate.
Mhm.
I have between 22 and 25 typically, but in the
Okay.
public school system, still a little bit higher than that.
Right.
Um, yeah, which is a lot of students. There's a big sort of buzzword, at least going on within my job right now, is students need to be seen, and it sounds like a really simple. It's like, of course you need to. If you never see a student, how do you teach them? But I think what they mean by that is a student's going to be a better learner if they feel like they're understood, not necessarily like on a weird personal level, but that you know something about them, and
Mhm.
you see maybe what they're going through in the classroom, or you get to hear their individual perspective, and that connection point can maybe breed some intrinsic motivation within them.
Mhm.
So to your point about class sizes, it's when the class size gets too big, some students, especially ones who might struggle to learn, learning disabilities or things like that, those students especially, they need to be seen, and that they need to be appreciated for who they are.
Mm. That's a good point. But do you feel like that then falls on the teacher? Like to let's say a teacher has like in high school has like four different classes. It's like can add up to 100 students, you know. of course, they've been know all their names or whatever, but to build an actual connection with every one of them, especially the ones that are a little bit more resistant or maybe even not even like purposely resistant, but they have attention issues or they're not
Mhm.
socialized as well. Like that must be really difficult. Do you feel like the school, and like as it is now, actually promotes that kind of environment, like that you're able to create these connections with the kids?
Yeah, I
You
mean, I
know?
can only speak to the respective school that I teach at for
Yeah.
sure, but, and I only have just for years. I've been at one school my entire career, so,
Hmm.
there's definitely more perspectives you can gain there, but, um yeah, this is one sort of side to being a teacher that maybe some of your listeners may not have heard about. But other than just being in the classroom, one of the meetings that my school has, at the start of each semester is something called we call it a grades meeting. I'm sure there's a variety of names for it, but we sort of just go through the roster and we talk about different students and the different observations that we have as teachers, almost like a group of coaches, like maybe talking about the scouting report before a game, like what to watch out for with this person, and it's always in a positive light. How do we best support this person, or what have you noticed about this person? It's best when this person sits at the front of the class. So
Yeah.
that's where the community aspect of school can really go
Mm.
into supporting the students, because I can have one observation. I have some students who I get to know really, really well, who at graduation, it's like I've worked a ton with this person. And inevitably, there's some students at graduation. It's like, I don't even really remember you. It's just, to your point, it's too many people, right?
Mhm.
So I think to make every student seem, teachers do lean on each other, um,
Yeah.
as best they can. But there is always that feeling of guilt when you're writing report cards at the end of the semester, and you have those couple kids that they're somewhere in between. They weren't like the brightest, most fun ones. They also weren't the troublemakers. You spend a lot of time on them. But the ones that are kind of in between, like I was, it's like, oh, what do I write about this kid? And and I would say if there's any young teachers listening to this, pay attention to those kids. Have conversations with them,
Mm.
get to know them, because the ones sitting right in the middle that may not be, you know, the all stars that make your class make you look good, and they may not be the
Mhm.
ones that you need to put your focus on, but they deserve your attention as much as anybody. And they can be really interesting individuals as well.
Nice. Yeah, no, that's a great point. And it's great that you have that environment. I think that a school needs to have a team. It's not just like one teacher in the classroom, okay, go, here's 100 students, connect with all of them, good luck, Like it's an entire team environment. And so I think bringing in that aspect is super important. But where I would like to go with this now is I don't want to beat the dead horse of kids these days and their cell phones and like they can't pay attention or whatever. But what I'm more interested in, because we all kind of recognize that yeah, kids aren't paying attention, whatever. Okay, fine. But how are they socializing? I'm wondering what you've seen over the past 10 years. Have you noticed a significant change in how they are not only engaging with you, but also engaging with each other? If you could speak to that, that would be really interesting.
Yeah, yeah. In the interest of also not being the dead horse, maybe I'll start this topic by sort of saying I think what I'm seeing in with students and with people of that age is the same thing. I think I'm sort of seeing across the board in the general population now, just sort of at that level where they're still developing, and maybe there's less maturity in certain situations, but um, and this is totally just my own personal, not qualified societal observation. But everything feels more polar to me. And what I mean by that is I think a lot of interactions between people, the way people react to stress, which is something maybe we'll get into, um, is more extreme one way or the other. And I think there are two things that have kind of pushed that. And I think one of them is social media and technology. We were sort of talking about that. And I think the pandemic had a very similar and magnifying effect.
Mm.
So one thing I've noticed with students is I think when they're friends, they're really close. There are students that have fantastic friendships at my school. It's really fun to watch. It's fun to watch them developing, like teaching grade nine, and it's fun to see groups of friends. And they truly do care about each other. Um, and then there are but there is sort of a separation. I do think it's a little bit more separated now. Sort of like, well, these are my people, so these aren't my people. Um,
Mhm.
I also think when it comes to just the way students are communicating, um, disagreements aren't super casual anymore. It's like, well, I'm way over here, so I'm way over here. But that's not just
Mhm.
with students. That's, you see that everywhere. You see that on Twitter. You see that everywhere. Everything's very left and right. Um, and
Mhm.
I really think the pandemic magnified that shift that was already happening, um,
Mhm.
due to social media. Like I really found during the pandemic, people either ended their relationships or strengthened them. They either
Mhm.
got really fit or got out of shape. They don't invested in their job or they changed careers. And I think there is a sense with the way students interact, um, that they really go really hard one way or really hard the other. And there's not a
Mhm.
lot of sort of I'm in the middle.
Mhm.
Which I think can
Mhm.
be that middle area is an open-minded place. Um, and
Right.
it's a really healthy mindset to be in a classroom to kind of be like, well, I don't know what I think yet. Let's talk about it. Um,
Yes.
so I try to do my best and have some discussion activities, where people aren't taking a side right away because I think we're so quick to
Mhm.
do that now.
Yeah. That's a great point because these kids are learning from their parents, from social media, from the culture, right? And if you're seeing that they're more extreme and more polarizing, like where is that coming from? Well, of course it's coming from the environment that they're in, that they are being pushed in a sense to make that hard extreme judgment. And yeah, it really does close down minds, and when you want to learn, you need that open-minded space. You need discourse and discussion, and not just automatically jumping on one side because you feel like that's the right way or whatever. It's trying to understand. It's like, well, I have an opinion. I have an idea of where I may land, but I want more information. I want to be able to hear the other side. Like this is so important, especially in high school students, right? Um, and actually, to be fair, like it makes sense even biologically. When I was 16, I thought I knew everything. I was like, I knew
Just
exactly what it was. And it was later on that I started to build more of an open-minded sense. So perhaps there's something in a developmental way that could kind of come out, but there also needs to be an environment that's going to allow that to happen. So I don't know that that environment is happening in the universities, for example.
well,
You know,
you are right that at that developmental stage, it is cool to have it all figured out. And and you think back to when we were in high school, even though it was cool to have it all figured out, that gives you the temptation to just pretend that you do, even though you don't.
right?
Which can create some of that sort of those polarizing discussions and even interactions where sometimes people don't feel great, at the end of it. And I also think this connects to what we were talking about earlier about grades. There's something I've noticed is students, because they're motivated by the success of their grades, there's a heavy focus on, okay, well, what's the right answer? What?
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually not the point of education. It's to keep asking more questions. You know,
Yes.
so the, you're asking earlier about what is something that's changed. Open ended projects that don't have necessarily a right answer you're supposed to get to are a greater challenge for students now than they used to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yet on the flip side, students are really good at taking tests, I find. Now. So they're really good at using all these resources and all the information at their disposal to get to somewhere if they know they need to get there. But if you give something a little bit more open ended, they want that one concrete thing,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes that's not the point, and sometimes it doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
So again, that
Yeah.
middle ground is a breeding ground for passion and knowledge and growth.
Mhm.
And sometimes there's a reluctance to go there for everybody.
Yeah. Well, because in that middle ground, you also have uncertainty, and uncertainty breeds anxiety. Like they come together. And
Well
to
said.
be open minded, I think you have to have a kind of an uncertainty. And with that sense of a little bit of fear that you don't know, or that you feel like you should know but you don't, and so that is an emotion that people are trying to get away from all the time. And I think this links back to what we were talking about before, that discipline factor. We're not sitting with ourselves anymore. We are constantly just going right to the phone, right into TikTok, right into Instagram, whatever it is to take our attention. We don't sit in that uncertainty anymore. And
Mhm.
that's what I've seen it in myself. So it's the only way, like, I'm really being like self-reflective here. But I can see it like around as well. And these young kids, they need that. They need that time of when the anxiety comes in and they're like, hang on, maybe maybe I don't know. And how could I know if I want to, right? Or how could I know more? And then and kind of recognizing that that is the process, like you were saying, like that is such an important part. And that's actually probably what it's more about than actually finding the right answer.
Absolutely. That anxiety feeling of I don't know what's next, that is a that is a stress response. And
Mm,
and personally, I think the definition of stress, I think, is the most misunderstood definition. Um, it's actually, so the definition of stress is the body's response to a change in its environment. And the mind and the body are connected. So you could throw the word mind in there instead of body. So you experience a feeling of, okay, I don't know this place wherever I am mentally or physically. So then there's a natural response that happens to that unknown. And then how do you deal with it? And
mm,
that is in, through technology, what we've been talking about, um, through kids specializing more in things at an earlier age, they are in more comfortable, more familiar environments more often
mhm. Yeah.
than people our age or even older individuals were. We were in those stressful environments out of necessity. Sometimes we were locked out of our house because our parents weren't home yet. It happened to me all the time.
Right.
I remember one time I was drinking out of the hose in the backyard because I was so thirsty. Little tiny things like that. Those are in a moment you have a stress response and then you learn how to deal with it.
Mhm.
And every single one of those when you're a young person is valuable. And there are two ways to deal with stress. You can either minimize the stress response, and I believe that comes from discipline. So you put yourself in situations over and over again so that eventually that environment isn't new anymore. Going
Mhm.
back to the definition of stress, then you don't have a stress response because that change in environment isn't a big change.
Mm.
Athletes are masters at this.
Yep.
You train, you train, you train. So that way, when the game comes or the race comes, you've been there before, right?
Right.
So then that stress response is minimized. That's the side of dealing with stress that I would like to see more emphasized in education.
Mhm.
The other side of it is how to tolerate the stress response once it happens, and
Mm.
that's where the words coping mechanisms come into play. And I think the
Mm.
education system is doing a wonderful job at having students explore different coping strategies, fostering them in schools through like mental health programs. Um,
Mm.
I think I'm seeing a lot of positive things when it comes to finding healthy coping mechanisms. I'm trying to adopt a few myself. Uh,
Mhm.
but that minimizing of stress kind of goes back to our previous conversation about discipline.
Yeah. That is a really awesome distinction that you made there between the coping mechanisms and then the discipline again. Because yeah, we've got lots of coping mechanisms, and you're right, those are important because you can't always change the external environment, right? You can't always immediately change whatever it is you're doing. Building habits takes time, right? So even if you are working in that area, trying to build your discipline, it's going to take some time. And if you're overly stressed, you need a way to kind of move through that, right? And so the coping mechanisms and finding ones that are healthier and that are like less like damaging to your mind body, then that's gonna be really good. And you're right, like we do have more of those things that are building. This is actually one of the benefits of the internet as well, is that like there's like a plethora of coping mechanisms and people that are talking about this all the time. And like, you can go on YouTube and you can watch like all kinds of like therapists that will give like real like plans for people for free. for what they
Mhm.
can do to deal with stresses and for young kids as well. So like that's really quite amazing, you know. And actually I feel like this is a good little segue for us into AI because that's the big buzzword these days, and for good reason. This is and it's so fascinating. AI, I think, in one way, relates to this discussion really well because it's it provides those clear answers with some certainty, very quickly,
So, mhm.
very comforting, and it can act as a great coping mechanism. Like if you need to talk something out, you can do it with an AI. If you're trying to understand a subject or trying to understand an idea, um, AI is incredibly helpful and it can do it very quickly. And how you use it is incredible. Like it's amazing this tool that we have. But let's get into how this has been changing the environment in the schools, especially in the past 2 years. So yeah, John, what's been going on with AI in schools?
I can try to answer this question. I don't know how effective I'll be, but first, that's a really great insight that you made about it giving comfort. I never really thought about it like that because I was just describing about how to minimize the stress response, put yourself in that scenario over and over again. Um, and yeah, I just now that I'm just thinking about what you said, if if I have something that I need to get done and I'm a student, I'm just imagining right now, and I'm pushed up against a deadline, I'm going to feel better once that thing is done because now I'm going to be out of the situation where I'm running out of time. That's a stressful situation.
Right.
So having AI do something quickly does help, regulate a stress response. So that's an interesting insight
Mhm.
that you made there. So yeah, in school, I'll be the first to tell you, um, just like the world didn't know what hit them when social media kind of blew through, the same thing is happening now. We are This is moving way faster than the world is prepared for. I think everyone sort of acknowledged that. Um, I'm a little bit behind the eight ball. I don't use it as much as some of my peers in education dabbled a little bit. Students are using it more and more. Like the graph is like almost vertical. It's
Mhm.
crazy right now. My perspective on it is the issue is not that it exists. Um, but just like everything else, the why is important. Why is somebody using it in an
Mhm.
individual situation? And the sort of opinion that I've developed so far, and I think this is going to change because this is just all still so new to me. Using AI to save time, I think is a fine decision to make.
Mhm.
So for example, for maybe a student, I have some students, they're really effective at using it as like almost a search engine. So they'll
Mhm.
be brainstorming, they want to gather some research. They'll basically use it as their Google to kind of curate the research better. But then they'll take that, they'll reference properly, they'll paraphrase it properly. Those are all skills that I want to see. And they used ChatGPT or what have you to basically do it in a quicker amount of time because they were able to critically think and do that. Same with me as an educator. One way that I use it is I'll use it to help me write like a letter of reference. So I will write a prompt that's longer than the letter that AI ends up helping me make. It basically just cleans things up for me. That's a skill that I have that I know how to do, but it's just going to save me some time.
Mhm.
Where I think there's trouble is if you have a high school student who still needs to increase their development of their ability to write, they need to increase their ability to research effectively. They need to get better at articulating their points or connecting research to course topics. These are all things that they need more practice because they're only 14, 15 years old. They're going to
Mhm.
need those skills to be higher. If you start using AI in a way to just build your project so you can avoid having to do those things, that is very problematic. Um, and there's more and more ways to get away with doing that, to
Mhm.
be quite honest with you right now. So that's sort of where I think we're at in education right now is how can we use it in a way that fosters intrinsic motivation and passion and curiosity, all those things that we were talking about earlier. And not just, we can't ignore the fact that this is here and students are going to
Yeah.
use it.
Yes.
So I don't have an answer to that question yet. I'm working on it, but my perspective is if you're using it to save time and to do things that you already have the skills to do, fine. But I wouldn't want to see it take away from something that you still want to develop. And I can say that even for myself, like,
Yes.
I want to get better at being more creative with the activities that I put together. So is it acceptable for a teacher to make new activities that are creative using AI? Absolutely. But if you want to get better at the skill of imagining those things yourself, AI is not going to help you get better at the skill. It might do it for you. So I would just say for anybody, if you want to continue to create, be careful of what you allow AI to do for you. But if you want to save time for skills that you already have, hey, it's here. You can use it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And it's a danger that every one of us has to keep in mind, because it's so easy, even now in 2025, to start offsetting so many of our things that we need to do, or our even our creative ability to AI. Like, we're already at this point, and it's only going to get better. There was a great quote I heard in some podcast somewhere that was like AI right now is the worst it will ever be. Like, it's only going to get better, and that's insane when you think about it like that, right? And I wanted to ask you about this. As you were talking, you brought up a really good point. This is that the skills that they don't have, right? Like, if you're using it to save time, but that's okay. But if you don't have the skills, and then you're offsetting to AI, that's a problem, because then you're never really going to learn. But let's imagine a 15-year-old student who is not that great at writing, doesn't enjoy it, doesn't like it, and you're trying to motivate them through discipline and things like, "Hey, you gotta learn to write because this is important for you," and whatever. And they're like, "Mr. John, this AI is always going to write better than me. It will always be better than me. It is likely going to do most of the work. What is the point in me learning how to do this skill when this AI is absolutely going to do it better?" What would you say to them?
I think I try to talk to students a lot about where I hope they're going to end up. And inevitably, what all students are going to have to do at some point is make money.
Okay.
So, what I would say, probably just thinking about my answer as you're asking, is yeah, AI might in the future, it might be able to write everything I ever need to write. I may never need to write a Word document again if AI gets as good as some are projecting it may get. But in my future as a human being, am I going to have to articulate my ideas to somebody else with my voice to communicate why I deserve to get paid? Am I going to have to articulate my ideas clearly to save a relationship or maintain a relationship with somebody that I love? So the skills that one needs to get through a course in school, it's really easy to look at that in a vacuum and say, when am I ever going to need this? But all of it pertains to something else. Like one of my academic idols is Neil deGrasse Tyson, because I'm a big space geek. And there's a famous bit that I've seen of him where he talks about, people will say, when am I ever going to need this thing from my math class? When am I ever going to need y equals mx plus b, a linear line on a graph? It's like, maybe you'll never need that, even though it can determine salary and all kinds of things that affect our lives. When am I ever going to need to explain it if I become, I don't know, a firefighter or something like that? Well, when are you going to need to follow a series of steps to come out with an outcome? When are you going to have to think critically to have one piece of information that you don't have? Every job ever. So it's not that you need to know math or that you need to be able to write a paragraph formally. It's that the act of learning how to do that gives you the life skills that you need to exist in this world. And there has never been an app for that. And I,
Mhm.
I don't believe that AI is going to allow us to do that. So that would
Right.
be, I mean, that would be my answer for now.
That is a great answer. Absolutely. And this is where us as educators and just like as a society need to communicate that point clearly to the younger populations. And that's, I think, something that some people, like you said, Neil deGrasse Tyson or yourself, are trying to do. But we needed like a real push to let that sink in for the kids, because too many of them are just gonna get caught in this, like, what's the point? What's the point of me even doing this? And that can lead to so many mental health problems, of course, because then they're hopeless and they
Mhm.
don't know what to do. Um, but you're absolutely right. No matter how good the AI gets, it's not going to be able to critically think for you. Like, it can do things for you, but it's not, unless we literally augment ourselves and become one with the AI, and that's a totally another discussion, and I think we're very far away from that, even if it is something that we wanted to do. We need to be able to learn these skills so you can, yeah, do something like communicate to, you brought up a great point, to in a relationship. Like, writing, for example, writing is an excellent way of organizing our thoughts, of learning how to speak. The written form and symbols has been a massive part. I think it was the greatest invention of all time, of humanity. It was the written language. And, and now with AI coming in, people are like, well, maybe it'll be AI instead. I'm like, no, we can't forget writing. We cannot forget symbols. We cannot
And,
forget how important that is.
to your point, like, quick kind of personal anecdote that I just thought of as you were saying that, when I was in grade 8, even through high school, I had like part of my learning profile or IEP is I struggled to write. I have a
Yeah.
bit of mild dyslexia. I always had great ideas up here or decent ideas up here, but I really struggled to put them on paper.
Yeah.
And in first year university, you and I were roommates, first year university,
Yes, we
and
were.
we talked a lot. We talked a lot about just whatever, long conversations, just like the one that we're having now. And in university, I really developed a better ability to articulate my ideas on paper. And I can tell you firsthand, it's not because I put in hours in the lab writing.
Mm,
I got better at writing through conversation, through real, authentic
mm,
conversation with another human being. Not
mhm,
just you, obviously,
mhm,
but that that came from authentic communication,
mhm,
not from something, not from having something on a to-do list and then
mhm.
minimizing that stress through AI. Um,
Right.
I going back to that point that you made, when you need to get something done, the power of overcoming it yourself is very, very important. So you've unlocked a whole new fear in me that AI is taking away from students.
Oh, yes. More fear. I mean, every day there's another fear that I'm like, "Oh god, like, how is this gonna take away, like, so much, change our life?" But, it's also going to support it in so many ways. We're gonna have both, right? And so that's why I think, again, coming back to that uncertainty clause, being able to actually sit and be like, "You know what? I don't know right now, and yeah, I can ask an AI, but maybe it'll be better if I just sit here and just kind of, like, think about it for a minute," or write something down, or just try and do something on my own, and use the AI to help me write it rather than have it do it for me, right? Like,
Uh-huh. And
so important.
that is why schools are going back to pen and paper more often. Work
Yeah.
has to be done in front of the teachers more often now. And it's not to be archaic. It's to I think I think we're trying to foster that environment of sit with the unknown.
Mhm,
Sit with the new environment that's it's safe. It's a safe environment, but it's got a little bit of that stress response. Let's learn how to deal with it together,
mhm,
and work on it with our students. And students and teachers, we've figured out how to deal with social media. It's going to be okay. I think
mhm,
there's a lot of talk in education. What's going to happen? I think universities are in a lot bigger trouble than high schools are, but
mm.
it's going to be fine. It's going to take time, but there's these things always work themselves out. Um,
Mhm.
I anyway, I think it'll be fine.
I like your optimism. I think we need more of that in this world. But the optimism is great as long as it's not naive, right? Naive optimism is probably one of the most detrimental things that you can fall upon. And in some ways, cynicism is better because at least you are a little bit more aware of the world, right? But an optimistic sense that's informed, that it's like I'm choosing to be optimistic because I already have researched and looked into the world. I've been aware and I've been critically thinking about this stuff, and I recognize that it could go wrong, but I choose to believe that it's going to go another way for these reasons,
I like that.
right?
Optimism
Yeah.
should come from something.
Yes.
Like for me, I've always thought that I generate optimism from hard work and from discipline.
Mhm.
So yeah, I say it'll be fine. I think in the education industry or any industry, if we're going to work through this AI stuff, it's going to take hard work and discipline and
Yeah.
communication. It's not going to be fine because we want it to be fine. To your point, absolutely.
Right. Yeah. And you know what? Okay, I think this is a good point, good time to go into how we've learned discipline. So one thing to let our listeners know, you and I, yes, we were roommates in university together, but we were also swimmers. We were both competitive swimmers, and we did that for many many years. And of course, now like another part of your career is you're also the coach of the basketball team and the softball team. So uh, could you first tell me just like where like what is like your background of that life as an athlete and perhaps how that relates to how you learned discipline? Because we've been talking about discipline a lot. And I feel like that it's likely that your life as an athlete had a real impact on that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So two sport athlete growing up. Yeah, I don't want to
Mhm.
spend too much time on like the background, but I was a good basketball player. Not great, you know, um, rep basketball player. One thing in hindsight, I would love to know if I could have made a university team if I trained all through high school the way I trained for swimming. But just,
Mhm.
I mean, like we can only stick with what would happen. I was a half decent basketball player, but in grade 10, I became a much better swimmer at that time.
Right.
So I continued those two sports through high school. But I think, you know, discipline is something that I really lean on. It's obvious in these conversations, but that really came from the sport of swimming for me. I'm sure for you too. I know for you too. For your listeners who don't know, it's a sport that has a lot of training hours, more than most sports, almost all sports. And going back to that whole motivation discipline thing, it's easy to find motivation to race and to support your teammates. Those are really fun things. But waking up at 4:44 a.m. and scraping the ice off your windshield, that's nothing but a disciplined moment. Um,
Mm.
so all the discipline that I've learned has come from just the training for swimming, or at least a large part of it. That's something I try to emphasize in the coaching opportunities that I currently have, doing softball and basketball.
Right. Yeah. And I guess having that background as an athlete, you are able to then convey that to these young student athletes that how important that discipline is, right? Like they just like coming to practice, and then and also not just coming to practice, but also how you show up at practice. That was always something that I struggled with, because I would show up to practice. I mean, I'd always tell my coach, like, "Coach, I'm here. I'm here every morning at this freaking practice, and I'm here, and I'm swimming. What do you want?" Right? But he was like, "But it's not just about showing up. It's also about what you do here at
Mhm.
every moment, and then outside of that, of course, is like the discipline outside of the practice. So once I had learned how to be more disciplined in practice, then it goes to another level, right?" So, yeah, if you could speak a little bit to that whole world.
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, like it was super fun to watch you walk through that process when we were at university, like, learning how to not just operate in practice, but all of those extra things that you had to do to get to the level that you were working towards. It does take all those extra things. Some of those things I wasn't willing to do myself. So
Mm.
one quote from one of our former coaches that I love that I use in the classroom all the time when a student says, "Oh, I want to get a 90," is if you want to accomplish something that not many people do, you have to be willing to do things that most people aren't willing to do. And it kind of sounds obvious when you hear it said, but a lot of people, they want that comfort. that we were talking about before. Um,
Hmm.
but when it comes to coaching, and I'm still kind of growing and learning in this area. I coach softball, but I've been coaching in a higher level basketball program for a couple of years now. So still learning a lot, having a lot of fun with it. But I kind of feel like it's like the ultimate challenge of human interaction because, you know, when I look back to our experience when we were that age, like I would love to go back in time with the mindset and the wisdom I have now about the importance of all those things in the
Yeah. Right.
physical body that we once had. We all think about that, right? If I was
Right.
back, I could take my brain.
Yeah.
But
Right.
fact of the matter is I'm coaching high school students. On my basketball team, for an example, there's 14 different teenage perceptions of what is important in this moment right now.
Mm.
And we're trying to get all of those together for a common goal and to be cohesive. And the amount of ways that can go sideways is insane. Which is like totally the blessing and the fun of it is, you're trying to influence the success of all of these individuals, in it for a team sport to also garner
Hmm.
team success. Um, it's a really big challenge when it comes to relating to other people, and that's why I got
Mm.
into education in the first place. So, as a competitor, someone who's very very competitive, as you know about me, I love the challenge of trying to figure out that maze of how to get all these perceptions to work together in the most effective way.
Mm. Yeah. No, I think relating to our discussion, like with education, about discipline, about sitting in that uncertainty, about like just like building some of those like social relations. One of the things that we could do is just to really support kids in their athletic education and in their athletics in whatever sport that happens to be. Like there's so many, and I'm one that thinks like maybe sports is not for everyone, but athletics can be for everyone. Like there's so many different ways that you can engage with athletics, right? And and that could be one of the saving graces, I think, of this generation of kids that are growing up with all this technology and AI and everything like that. Because you're not on your phone when you're running an 800-meter race around a track, or you're not on your phone when like you're 5 points down in the fourth quarter of a basketball game. You're with the people right there. You're sitting in that uncertainty. You don't know what's going to happen. You're frustrated. You're angry. You're annoyed. You're also super competitive and want to win, and like all of these things that just foster so much learning that transfers to so many parts of our lives. So like what are some of the things that you think you've learned from sports and from also seeing it now teaching and coaching? What are some things that you think have really changed your life perspective or how you go about your own career and life? What do you think, man?
Still definitely like figuring out my coaching philosophy, like still kind of a work in progress. Um, but something I've kind of taken away from the experience is, potential is a word in sports that's thrown around a lot.
Potential.
Potential. And a lot of people would argue like potential doesn't mean anything because that's just what it is. It's something that hasn't happened yet. Um, but I really think that, um, something I'm learning is that the athletes themselves, I think, really need to create the framework that gives them their highest potential. Um, and I think that can be a trap for a coach to think, oh, I can get this kid to reach his potential through the way I do things. And
Mhm.
I really think in a job that requires you to impart wisdom and to meet someone where they're at, because they have a perception of what they want to do and how to get there. To ignore that and be like, well, this is how you got to do it. There might be some room for that. You might have to say, well, this is what you got to do in this scenario. But I think you really need to coach the individual to a certain point. So I
Mm.
think there's a balance between two things. I think you need to foster an environment where they can really set the standard for what they're going to accomplish through what they do. Um, but then I think you need to try to maximize their buy-in within that. In basketball, they call it being a player's coach, when you sort of let the players do what they want to do.
Mm,
And then
okay.
on the flip side, there's sort of like the dictator type of coach, where it's like they coach one way, and every team that they have is going to have these plays and this way of practicing. And like my dad always says, the answer is probably somewhere in the middle. Like I'm growing to learn that I think the best coaches, they have rigid philosophies that work, that they can push people and be hard on the kids when they need to, but they can also learn and adapt to what they have right in front of them.
Hmm.
And the best coaches that I've had are somewhere in between those two. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that's what I'm learning how to struggle through, because I'm such a relational person. I'm a people pleaser.
Hmm.
I love when I can make everybody happy. So I think sometimes I go the way of trying to meet everybody where they're at and be that player's coach. But
Mm,
sometimes I need to just enforce a standard a little bit more um, ferocity. So that's a really fun learning process that I'm in.
hmm.
But coaching is really the like I already said, the ultimate challenge of human interaction. Is kind of like being a teacher in the classroom, except in basketball, there's a whole other team and coach that are actively trying to stop you.
Yeah, right.
It's a little bit different.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, and that element I think is really important. I'm trying to think if there's any athletics or sport that doesn't have some sort of competitive element. Um, Maybe there's one out there or something, but let's just say, for the sake of argument, say that most of them have that competitive element. And I think that's important to have. I think there's a lot of hate on the kind of competitive environment because it can become toxic in our culture. Like when it's like competitive to be the best, like in terms of like getting the most money or the most status or the most bags or whatever, right? Um, but especially for young kids who are learning, like there's there's nothing more motivating than wanting to get the ball away from that other guy who has the ball and to get it in the freaking net, you know? And like that is so motivating. And that there's something powerful to that. It can really shape kids. It can really bring in that sense of like why is getting the ball in the vet valuable? It's like it's really like what if you really think about it, like we are putting so much value on this. Why? Why is this important? But it is. Becomes so important to people, right?
Yeah, well, the why is important, and I think you made a great point earlier. The transferability of all of the things that you pick up along the way is what I think is so important. Yeah,
Mm.
as one of our friends used to tell us all the time, like, yeah, we were good at traversing through water. What does that do for me now? I don't really think it does anything for me now, to be quite honest with you. I'd prefer to
Mm.
float with a drink in my hand, um but all of these other transferable things that the experience gave me,
Yeah.
including overcoming a competitive environment that helps you in a career, learning how to
Mhm.
support other people, that helps you in a family. So, but the thing that's so funny about the human experience is you kind of need to go through it before you actually understand and appreciate that. So you can say 1,000 times to a high school basketball team or a softball team or whatever you coach, and this would apply to music and drama and anything you got to commit your focus to, I'm sure. But you can say those messages, but those kids, they're going to have to learn from the losses. They're going to have to learn from being beat by someone who did those little things better than them, even though you
Mhm.
said it. And that's the amazing thing about the human condition, is that we learn from our experiences better than hearing it from someone
Yeah.
else. But still
Mhm.
try our best to convey those messages.
I wanna touch on a point that you mentioned before, like, uh, it's something that you and I have talked about many times when we look back on our own career, our athletic career, and think, "God, if I had only done this, or if I'd only thought like this, or whatever, that how much better we could have been." I think this relates really well to especially the mental health conversation within athletics. So, I had a coach, who had told me that sports or at least swimming at the time is 90% mental, 10% physical, right? And And I always thought about that, and I was like, "Okay," and then I didn't actually think about it at all and just continued just trying my best to just push my body to the limit. But I look back now, I'm like, "God, if I had just meditated a little bit, if I had just journaled sometimes, if I had read a book every now and again, I wonder how much I would have been able to cope or kind of move through and manage some of the stresses that come from being an athlete, and then also in both in practice and in training. So, what do you think? That quote, 90% mental, 10% physical. Do you think that fits? Do you think that's the case for success in athletics?
Well, I think it's one of those things when you just think about the words themselves, you can interpret that quote in like so many different ways, right?
Yeah.
You can say, well, okay, how much of because I agree that mindset is sort of everything. I know for me that when I reduced my training a little bit and freed my mind through some experiences that I had, I went faster. So that would confirm the quote in a way.
Mm-mm.
But I think especially in those individual sports where you're just racing and the training is all about, preparing for pushing to your limits, um, the day in and day out, the mentality, because you're gonna do the physical training, but the mentality goes a long way. Whereas
Mhm.
whereas in a team sport, you could argue that the mental is even higher because you got the X's and O's of the game and the strategy, and you need to remember things. So if for any
Mm.
of the listeners that think that sports is just about having the most movement skills or fitness level, there's a million people out there that can match the person beside them in that. But the look at any pro league, the pro athletes, those are the ones that have both.
Yes.
They have the mindset, they have the wisdom, they have the
Mhm.
discipline and the motivation, and they have all those physical skills.
Right. Yeah, case in point, you and I being in the swimming world, there's been a sensation just taking the whole sport by storm is Summer Mcintosh, who is the greatest swimmer, Canadian swimmer of all time, and probably one of the greatest female swimmers of all time. And she's only 18 years old. And if you watch her in interviews, this this woman now has, and she had this from early on. She's got the discipline, she's got the drive and the internal motivation, but she's also very collected. She's grounded. She's got a good support network around her. Her family's always there. She recognizes how important her friendships are and her relationships are. Of course, I don't know anything about Summer, but I respect the hell out of her because she's only 18 years old and she has built this resilience to to this world, this very insane kind of media world as well, through her discipline, through her support networks, and through her own internal drives for what she wants to
Mhm.
accomplish. And it's really incredible to see. And and I'm so glad that we have someone in Canada like that that's motivating, especially young women, but anyone, like
Mhm.
whether it's in swimming or in sports or whatever, because it really just goes to show like she is doing all of the things that are necessary for success, and we're not all going to be Summer McIntosh, right? But that we can like that is a great ideal to strive towards, and if you watch her in interviews, god, she's collected and she's cool and she's calm and she's very well spoken, and that comes from, I think, as well, like just she just been curating this over time. It's incredible to see.
Yeah, and on the flip side, is it possible to achieve that level of success and not have that amazing mental approach? Maybe, but for her to be at that level, accomplishing what she has, and to have the wisdom that we kind of perceive her to have in those interviews, am I surprised? No. Like
You're right.
I think those going back to the quote that we were sort of trying our best to break down, I'm not surprised at all that somebody having that level of success physically in a really grueling sport and really grueling events, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised that she is sort of wired at a maturity level that I certainly didn't have when I was that age. That's for sure.
No way. I look at this girl and I was just like, God, like I was 18 and I was a child. but she's a woman, and she's still like a young woman that's maturing and growing. And I'm excited to see what she's able to do without like trying to give her too much pressure to maintain this in any sense, because God, like she's already accomplished so much, but that she's like really presenting something that of what a real um, athlete needs to do to achieve success in this kind of level. I would love to see what she ends up talking about more in the future about like she, um, how she does with her mental health and how she
Mhm.
manages all these things. And because yeah, like you said, grueling events, really difficult. And now that uh, after the Olympics last year, when she had won so many medals and she became like a Canadian hero overnight, she became a media sensation, but it didn't seem to affect her, at least not in terms of
Mhm.
her ability to perform in the pool and to keep calm and keep motivated and do what she could. Like, it was incredible to see, and because I don't know that I'd be able to do that. If I became a wild success overnight and suddenly everyone is just, like, interviewing me and throwing me into, like, sports things and Red Bull commercials and whatever, like, God, I don't know. I don't know that I would have that mental resilience, you know? So it just goes to show that she's been doing the work.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I handled it well myself with even 1% of that success, but I, uh,
Right.
I think just, just because the conversation is kind of steered to this example, like, I really think she's a sort of an embodiment of a lot of the things we've talked about so far is
Mhm,
discipline, but understanding the why behind what she's doing, um,
mhm,
dealing with, like, to your point about getting all of this attention after accomplishing something. That's a new environment. A new environment
mhm,
invokes a stress response. She has tolerated that seemingly very well. Again, this is all just
mhm,
with what we're seeing, not being
mhm,
close to the situation, but she seems to embody a great skill set, with a lot of the things we've been discussing here. So, good for her.
yeah.
I'm excited to see where she goes.
Well, you know what? I think this is a good time to move into, like, one of the things that we wanted to really talk about today that I think relates really well to sports, as well as education and being in a school environment and life in general. It's a little bit more like life philosophy, but I'd love to talk about authenticity, because I think that, especially in like you yourself being an educator in high school, that is a word that actually wasn't part of my vocabulary when I was young. I didn't know what that word was, um, but but it was definitely something that I was striving towards. I wanted to be authentic. I didn't know how to do that, but I didn't even have a word for it. So before we start to try and understand what or how we can start to move towards that, let's be clear on our definition. So, how would you define authentic? And remember, you don't have to, it doesn't have to be specific. Just, I know it's a tough one to do, but just when I say authentic, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, that's a good question. Expect that one.
Right.
I think there's two parts to this. So I think, right away, authentic sort of means being true to whatever, the subject is. So if we're talking about a person,
Mhm,
I would argue that behaving authentically would be what somebody is seeing is your true self. So you're not putting on a front of any kind. You're not doing something that's outside of what you would want to do if nobody was around.
right.
That would be the first part. But this, I think the other part is really important, and that is what you are also thinking while you do it. There are your actions, and there are your thoughts that are driving your actions. Because I do think it's very possible to do the things that you know are right, that do align with your values and who you are, but you can do those things with a motivation that isn't the right one. I
Mm,
think that's possible. I certainly know that it's possible for me. So, on the subject of authenticity, one of the most powerful things that I think I've been through and learned is that having a mindset to serve other people, um, will serve you in the long run the best as an individual. And I have learned that the hard way.
mhm.
It's something that I continue to struggle with, but I think it is naturally a big struggle for teenagers. because it's the first time in development where you're supposed to um, start having your own opinions about things, and you start to care about acceptance from other people other than your parents.
Mhm.
And inevitably, even though you might know who you are and what you bring to the table, that influences your actions and sometimes your thoughts. Um, and that is something I've definitely been through, and struggled with. And I think there's two things in the human experience that influence what we do and say and think. And one of them is how we see ourselves, so our authentic self,
Mhm.
and and then it's how you wish to be seen by other people. We are the one species that we know of that has the ability to know that there's other perceptions of us out there, and we can try to think about and infer what people are perceiving, and we can try to alter that by our choices.
Mhm.
So that influences um, one's ability to be authentic, and
Mhm.
that is a huge challenge.
Yes. That we exist in an environment, a relational environment, right?
Yes.
I think you put that beautifully, because recognizing the importance of others in in your authentic self. So when I was in university, that's kind of when I started to come across this idea of authenticity, and then into my like early 20s. And at the time, I think now, had a misunderstanding of what that meant, in the sense that I thought being authentic meant being absolutely true to yourself, no matter what anybody else thinks or whatever anybody else wants to think about you. You just do the thing. And so it led me to quite a rebellious attitude, where I was constantly pushing against societal norms and toward people's opinions and judgments and all these things. And that is definitely important to do. I think like to question things is
Mhm.
important.
Mhm.
Um, Going through that rebellious phase of mine, that I had a little bit in high school, but I definitely started to more philosophically build in my early 20s. Um, it was important to go through to then eventually realize that uh, that the others and how they respond to you is a mirror, right? And that authenticity comes from being able to recognize yourself in relation to others and how you fit within the environment, right? And that's so important. So you can question and you can push against things and you can be yourself, but also recognizing that you are part of this whole organism, this entire atmosphere and environment. It's a fascinating thing, and I think that's something that we forget when we're young, right? Because it's very self-centered, like it and naturally, right? Because you're trying to grow and figure out who you are, right? But how that relates to other
Mhm.
people, and we can easily get pulled into that, like, all right, it's all about what other people think of me, right? Or then it's all about what I think about myself. It's like, again, you
It,
gotta
it
find that middle
needs
ground.
it needs to be, yeah, very well said. Like
Mhm,
it needs to be both.
mhm,
No matter how confident you are in who you are going to be you're going to be impacted by how you think others see you and how others see you. We are community based beings. So
mhm,
so yeah, you may have had this mindset of, well, I know what I think and this is the world that we live in, but this is how I'm going to do it. But you need other people, you know,
mhm,
you do.
mhm,
And I can speak to my experience a little bit. Um, Something that happened with me that really impacted my authenticity is when I started to get increased success in my sport. What happened to me in the sport of swimming is in grade 10, I went from being like not good at all
mhm,
to swimming pretty fast, like right away. Like it sort of happened over the course of one swim meet. And that garnered a lot of attention. I got a new coach and I got attention at school and girls talked to me for the first time. And all of a sudden I got letters in the mail from universities, and I didn't really have time to move through that change in environment. That
mhm,
there was a stress response that came from that. And in the short term, what got me there wasn't wanting to be super fast. It was that I loved my teammates. I liked working hard, and I had fun just being around people in the sport. That was what got me
Mhm.
there. But then all of a sudden, I liked that attention. I liked that. So instead of thinking about my teammates and just working hard for years, I thought, I want to be fast. I want to be the fast one. I got to be fast. And I actually I didn't do anything different. And I did the same type of training. I still cheered on my teammates just as hard. I did all the right things, but instead of my mindset being one that served and loved others, like when I was in grade 9 and kind of not caring, what was in
Mhm.
my head was, well, if I cheer the loudest for my teammates, then I'm doing it right. And I can confess now, there were times where I was cheering for some of my swimming teammates. And in the back of my head, I was hoping they didn't qualify for the meet that I know I didn't qualify for, because I was going to miss out. Like how
Mhm.
unauthentic is that?
Mhm.
I was doing all the right training, but I wasn't doing it because it was a fun challenge. I was doing it because I needed to be fast. And
Yeah.
it wasn't until I shifted my mindset back into focusing on the other people in my environment that I actually continued to do the same stuff. But I had a teammate, I had a teammate who I wasn't even close friends with, who one day he said, you work hard and you're a good trainer and you're a good leader, and I appreciate you. And that meant more to me than any accomplishment in the actual sport.
Mhm.
And as soon as I heard that, I just started swimming faster,
Mhm.
because who I am authentically and what I have to offer the community around me was actually that. And I
Mhm.
lost that for a while. So, if for the listeners of this, if I could leave one thing that I've learned personally in this athletic and education journey, is having a mindset to serve other people, however that is the best way that you can fulfill your own individual accomplishment.
Mhm.
It's life works backwards in this weird way like that. I think.
Right. I think that's such a beautiful point, but I would love for you just to speak a little bit more to that.
Mm,
How do you balance that against people pleasing? Because that is I think there's a lot of people that really they wanna help others, they wanna be with others, especially like, myself in the mental health field now, in the mental health space.
mm,
And part of this podcast is about trying to bring out ideas and talk about these things, right? And I myself, yeah, I wanna help. But at the same time, um, in the past, I've had times where, yeah, like I'm doing it for the wrong reasons. Where now
right.
I'm allowing others to curate who I am. Um, so how have you found that balance, or how are you finding that balance of authenticity and connecting with others and for others, but without people pleasing?
Yeah, I mean, that's super tough. I mean, one conversation we haven't gone too much into is the whole idea of dopamine and how this all connects. But, you know,
Mm.
so I would argue that it's the same thing when it comes to studies about brain chemistry and dopamine. Is a lot of the habits that one can do to either cope with stress or that are just good, that sustain a good level of dopamine. They usually involve something that can benefit not just the individual. So things like fitness, things like this
Mhm.
conversation we're having right now, very healthy.
Right.
Um, those are all things that don't just have to do with oneself. But yes, how do you balance? How do you have a mindset to serve others, but not just spend all your time pleasing other people, and then you deplete what you need as an individual? Um, that is that is a good question. Um, I think
Yeah.
I think a couple things come in there. I think time management is
Mhm.
important, and I think boundaries are important. I think
Mhm.
that's probably sort of the next phase
Mm.
of learning experience for me is I'm a people pleaser, but you need to have boundaries, because it's when you start lacking sleep, or you have increased stress because you haven't taken care of the individual needs that you have,
Yeah.
you can then try to please people, but it might go the other way on you.
Hmm.
I mean, that's a great. I would actually like to think about that more. That's a good question that you posed.
You know what? And I think that is a great point for us to wrap up this conversation is that we, instead of leaving it on an answer, we're going to leave it on a question.
I think that'd be
Just
very us to do that.
right? I think so, Well, because we talk so much about uncertainty and be able to sit in that, and that you and I recognize that we don't have all these answers, and that the kids, these students that are in your classrooms and in the schools and in Canada, around the world, wherever, um, to know that the teacher doesn't know everything. Question question that. Question what you're learning. Think about it. Actually engage with it. And so this question of authenticity, and I think you made a great point that in that service to others and having that kind of existential kind of view could be very helpful. But then take that and think about that. It's like, well, how do I balance that?
Mhm.
How am I able to keep a sense of self amidst all of the noise, of whether it's like technology and all these like things that are being thrown at us, but also then other people and other opinions and voices around. I think it's a beautiful thing to think about. It's a question that I think all of us would do well to go to sit in that uncertainty and have some anxiety about. I
Yeah, I
think it
mean,
would help.
we live in a complex world, and I got to say, like, what I love about you is, whenever we have a discussion just like this one, you're comfortable with the questions as much as you are pursuing wisdom and answers, and I think that's what makes you great. That's what makes you a great host here. But yeah, I think that's a great way to end off for all the viewers as well. Like, you know, speaking in education, again, it's not about the answer, right?
Yeah,
Answer is usually it depends or somewhere in the middle. Embrace those questions and just keep going.
absolutely. John, this has been such an amazing experience. Uh, I appreciate you so much for coming on today. This has been so much fun. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.